Charlie, welcome to the Mindship podcast. How are we doing?
I'm good. I'm just sitting here listening to that little intro music, thinking of a little monkey with cymbals with your head.
Yeah, yeah. I think is it in I think it might be either Family Guy or Simpsons. Is that person who's banging that?
Yeah,
That's literally my life, my career.
yeah, nice. Where does that come? I don't know if I've asked you where the whole concept of mindship comes from.
Whole concept of Mindship. It comes from it was a weird time. So I think at the time the book, The Chimp Paradox, was out.
Yeah,
But it had nothing to do with that. It was just by a pure coincidence. It was just in my mind. I liked the idea that a chimp is curious. They tend to be creative. You can see lots and lots of things of how we look at problems. And then mind is, in my mind, it's like this chimp bouncing around and mind coming up with new ideas and new ways of thinking and trying new things. I was like, okay, let's put them two together and see what that was like. And you'll know this. Like a brand is a brand, and the more people get used to saying it, it'll feel normal. But I remember at the start, Mind Chimp was like, "What does it mean? What's it about?" I was
yeah,
like, "How do we explain that?" So yeah, that was it. That was
yeah.
it.
Nice. Well, I mean, it's not offensive. That's
No,
that's a big tick.
no. I
Like
mean,
when we started Solved, Morton and I were chatting. We did a lot of brainstorming in the pub, but we were, coming up with a couple of weeks around what do we call ourselves. And here are a few previous options that Solved together could have been. So we had Shift,
okay.
which was actually our name for a bit. But then we realised because we had like an angular eye, if you looked at it, it looked a bit like shit. So we put that to one side. We had one called Transfer Magic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was my wife and Morton's wife's reaction to that as well. It's like, so yeah, we ended up on Solved together, but we couldn't buy Solved, the full word of Solved, because someone else had already done it and sat on it, and it's quite expensive when you're a startup to spend 10 grand on a URL. So we ended up just dropping the E, and then we realized there was already a marketing company called Solved, so we had to think of another word to add to the end. Hence Together. So that is the really long and boring story about why we called Solved Together. But it's funny how it comes about, isn't it? It's just nonsense, really.
Yeah, because the reality of it is when you we had this with Vendela, like Vendela wasn't meant to be called Vendela originally. I can't remember what we ended up calling. We came up with like Vendy and stuff like that, and similar to you, it was a case of we've got this name. I mean, you go out and you go, someone's got they've got the URL for
Yeah,
it and they've done jack with it for 10 years. And you're like, but yeah, it's
yeah.
and then I think the real Venderley was taken by a company who Workday Learning bought in the end.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. There you go.
What happened with Vendela in the end? We haven't really discussed it, but
Yeah,
see, it's curious to see because it was all very positive, I thought, at the beginning, and then it sort of just didn't continue
yeah,
at one point.
yeah. So it had big. We had lots of work coming through it. Like
Mm,
the problem is when me and Sam decided to do it, it was like, right, okay, here's the reality of it. We're creating a startup while I was writing the book, while I was in full time work, he was in full time work. And it's like, unless this business makes lots and lots of money for us where we can leave one of them, it'll have to be a secondary thing.
mm,
And Sam got a promotion at his company, which took him away from it. And I was so
right.
it was like, actually, we can't deliver the service we want to deliver, and we'd end up
Mm,
doing more harm than good to the customers if we did it half-assed.
yeah.
So we decided to close it down. We've had a couple of conversations actually. People wanted to buy it for two reasons. We had a company who wanted to use it they was a small managed learning service, and it was like,
Hmm.
this fixes all our problems.
Yeah.
And then we had quite a big managed learning service interested as well, because what it does is if you use a big company who's got loads and loads of vendors, often it's done through Excel
Mm,
exchange and it's done through emails and headcount. And actually, what Vendor really does is removes it and makes things super lean.
mm,
But it's just one of them things. The small managed learning service, which where I originally wanted it to go, couldn't in the end get the money from the bank. So it's
Right.
there. It's there. It's doing nothing. The main's
Hmm.
there. Everything's there. But it's like, yeah, I would like to do it.
Solved Venderly.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I would love to spin it back up because I think
Yeah.
the people who used it was like, this fixes so much of my problems.
Hmm.
Finding, people like Solved
Hmm.
who are good, and they're not good because they've invested loads of money in marketing. They're good because their customers and past customers have said so. There's value to that. That's social proof.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and then we had you got me down the rabbit hole here, Charlie. It's meant to be
Yeah.
me
Sorry.
interviewing you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Welcome to my podcast.
we had a company who I won't name, but when we very first set up, they pretended to be a vendor, and they went to Sam because obviously Sam wasn't in this space of learning and
Mm,
HR,
mm.
and they pretended to be one just so they could kind of get the jump on us, and it was just constantly shady. And I'm all up for competition because I think competition makes the pie bigger. It doesn't make something bad. But when you go, oh, you're shady, and you just don't have
Mm.
nice human traits, like it's
Yeah.
effort. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's Vendela. But anyway, Charlie, back to you. This is me interviewing you. So before I guess anyone, people might not know you, they might not have come across Solved, but I guess yeah, I ask all my guests to kind of summarize themselves with a log line, a summary of who they are. What would yours be?
All right. I've written down leader of Solve Together, which
Okay.
is factually correct. Father of two, brackets, next week.
Wow. Okay.
So number two is coming next week. If all
Holy
goes to plan,
shit!
it will be,
Congrats.
thank you, bud. It will be Wednesday at 11:25
Uh,
that I'll meet my next one because we're having a C-section this time, elective
Ah,
C-section, because the first one was such a brutal
yeah.
experience. We had an emergency C-section, so we can have an elective. So we're going for an elective option this time. So it should be nice and organised. We'll be in and out, hopefully in the day, and then yeah, back home for some nesting before Christmas.
Nice, nice. Do you know if it's boy, girl? Do you know?
It's a boy.
Okay.
So we've got a girl, which I love having a girl. She's been amazing, and I'm slightly apprehensive about having a boy now because I've enjoyed having a daughter so much. But there's also kind of the excitement that comes with having a new one. Um, so yeah, I look forward to meeting him.
Nice, nice. And right near Christmas. I mean,
Mm.
magical time for many.
Well, yeah, I'm leaving. Yeah, yeah. Well, I know I'm leaving. I'm leaving Solve Together in the capable hands of our mutual friends. Bridge has just joined us, so I'm going to be handing over quite a few bits to Bridge, and obviously Morton.
Mm.
Um, just hired another person who'll be hitting LinkedIn very soon, early November. So yeah, it's all going. It's all going great guns. We're just gearing up for next year, really, and another year of fun.
So I want to talk a little bit about Solved, but because I like the idea that the idea of what it is and how you set it up and stuff like that. But before I get down there, um, I asked my guests to pick a number between 1 and 12, and this number links to a list of questions which I will ask you the answer to a little bit later on. So, pick a number between 1 and 12.
7, please.
7. Okay, so the question what you've kind of picked here,
Hmm.
which I'll need the answer to later, is what's the most difficult thing you've ever had to apologize for? Okay.
God, there's so many to choose from.
So ponder on that and we'll come back to it a little
Yeah.
bit later.
Oh God.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I guess Charlie, from the listeners,
Hmm.
tell me a little bit, maybe give us a bit of a brief stop tour of who you are and yeah, kind of your background.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I started my career working to go way back, I was selling life insurance
Okay.
in a call center with all my mates, having a great time. But then, the shorter story is, I got hired by Nick Shatton Jones to BP, where my career started. So Nick's my work dad, basically, and he taught me everything that I know about learning and development. So that's where it all began. And then I went with Nick to PA Consulting, and that was where I learned how to be a consultant. Then I went off and did a year of business coaching, which is where I learned to be a coach. And then I started myself together with Morton, where I've learned to be a leader of a team. And I feel like I can say that now because I had some feedback from the team, and it wasn't all terrible, and some of it was quite positive. And I thought, oh, actually, I am doing the job I'm supposed to be doing, even though there's lots of improvements to make. So, that's why I feel a bit more confident saying that now. Whereas before, I just felt like I was just a bumbling buffoon, just making it up as I went along, which we all are
Yeah.
to some degree, especially as a consultant. You just fake it as you make it, don't you? But yeah, I feel like I've kind of made it in that role now. So yeah, now it's just a hire good people, get out of their way type strategy. Try and help
Nice.
clients solve big problems or little problems as well.
Nice. So you mentioned you started in a call center, and
Mm.
I have this debate, and it's not a debate. But pretend I'm surrounded by people myself who agree, which is fundamentally the wrong thing to do. But the my old boss and one of my peers, we talked about how our career upbringing all started in a call center.
Mm.
To where we are now, we're not in call centers. We're leading functions, heads of, and whatever else. Um, but there's something around the foundation, I guess, to a certain point. What call centers give you, I don't know. Like for me, when I look back at my call center background, I remember I joined to part me over until I get a real job, and then
Yeah,
when I sit back now, I go, "Oh wow, that was fundamental to me being who I am today." I don't know what is that same for you, or is it different?
no, it's a good question. One thing I can still do is pick up a phone and go, solve together, Charlie speaking, how can I help? Like, so you have those kind of little scripts built I suppose into your discussion or into your conversation that you can kind of pull out whenever you want. The other thing I was doing when I was in a call center was selling on the phone.
Mm.
So being good on the phone, being able to talk to people. I'm still shit at doing that, so talking to my wife on the phone. But if I'm in a kind of a client conversation on the phone, I feel like I can handle that. And I was also a manager at like 20, 24, and I was terrible. Like all of the worst things that you do as a manager of people, I would be doing them because I had no other frame of reference. The frame
Mm.
of reference I think you have when you start doing that. If you don't have, I'm not saying this was before Google, but like if you're put into that position, is kind of just copying what other people are doing around you. And if everyone else around you is just micromanaging, telling people what to do, um, favoritism, all those things, I think I was probably guilty of doing all of that. And so
Mm.
what I reflect on now is how ridiculous I was at that age. And yeah, I think probably it also has a humility effect on me because I'm like, when I know that I can be that ridiculous, it makes it difficult to feel anything other than embarrassed when you're working. So I like to maintain a bit of that um, playfulness in how I see, or lack of seriousness, I suppose you could call it, in what I'm doing day to day
Yeah.
as well.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because in hindsight, you always win. Like in hindsight, you always win. And when you
Mm.
look back, you go, "Wow, some of the stuff I did there was absolutely insane. I was really
Yeah,
good."
yeah,
But I
yeah.
guess when I think about it, so mine was always like, "Hello, welcome to Tesco Mobile. You're free to Danny. Can I take your name, please?" Um, the one thing when I think about the skill set what it gave me a skill set to build rapport quick. It gave me a skill set to move from listening to active listening
Mm,
and being able to problem solve without having to use my eyes and think in very abstract ways. Because I remember there was this time when I was working with someone and this lady was like, I'm trying to top up my phone and I can't do it. And she was telling me all these things why she couldn't top up her phone. So we're going through all this kind of filtering down from really big, this could be it, like fault diagnosis really quickly to filtering down to this. And in the end, the reason why her phone wouldn't top up is because she was taking the back off her phone, putting £5 on top of the battery, and putting it back on her phone. And I was like, wow, wow, like it gives you that thing of patience. It gives you that thing
mm,
of going, no, you're meant to ring someone up or go into a store to top your phone up. You're not meant to put some money on the back of your phone.
wow.
um, so I think it gives me that patience, that rapport, and that listening. I guess I don't know that, and obviously the skills that you mentioned there around the kind of leadership. I guess.
Or not, in my
Yeah,
case.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's easy to post rationalize your kind of career, isn't it? And go, these things had this impact on me. Yeah, I think there are a few defining moments. One of my favorite, most embarrassing moment uh, for my career was it was quite early on in my L&D uh, journey. So it was at BP with Nick. Um, I was brought in as a community engagement manager because Nick had figured out that social learning could be a thing and that building communities of practice could be a really good thing to have. So he hired me from a marketing agency where I had no experience of doing that whatsoever to do to do this job, and I ended up doing a presentation to the team at one point, and everyone was there. Morton was there. I don't know if any of them remember this, but I do. Um, and I did a presentation that was so bad and offensive, basically, um, that yeah, Nick pulled me in after the meeting and was like, "So Charlie, let's just have a little bit of a conversation about what just happened there. I'm going to give you some ideas as to things that can help you develop. Number one, read books."
Oh.
So good. So yeah, I was just literally faking it until I made it to start with, and but that particular example was a really like, okay, be a little bit more self-aware, Charlie.
Mm,
You're not going to get by on your boyish charm anymore. you have to be, you have to be an expert. And I did what was suggested, and it made me effective doing what I was doing in a very short period of time. Um, so yeah, I think there are those little moments that kind of dotted throughout a career, but I wouldn't say there was necessarily any whether I would have got to where I am today through a different route or whatnot. A lot of it's just luck, I think.
mm. What made it offensive? And I guess the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm trying not to get you cancelled here, Charlie.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
um, when I look at when I think about things like LinkedIn and attention and eyes on attention, actually by everything being like boiled rice, you have to be different to stand out, right? It's a bit like the whole kind of thing of salience, right? The thing what stands out is the thing what gives you attention.
Mm,
And when you look on, say, for example, LinkedIn, actually them extreme provocations are the things what get the traction. It's the things where you go, okay, forget about the fact of swearing or whatever. Actually, it stands, it pops, and I remember it. What made,
mm.
like, you'll
That's
recall
dangerous,
it.
though, I think, Danny, because yeah, there's kind of, and the end state to doing stuff that is disruptive and people take notice of is it's a little bit like social media in general, right? You become more and more extreme and
Mm,
more, challenging or offensive or however you want to describe it. And I think then you find yourself just doing that, and you end up
yeah,
like some people in our industry where they just post sort of rants basically.
yeah,
Um, Most of them, if I'm honest, probably don't actually do any proper work. They just do thought leadership, which isn't really um, well, you need thought leaders, I suppose, but I'm not sure whether or not they can back up what they say. Um, And then the other side of it is, as you say, just being super grey. But I think what I found is the middle ground for that is you just got to add value to people.
Mm,
And the way you add value is by doing what we do, which is understanding what what people are interested in, what they care about, what their challenges are, and then you show them. For us, it's about showing people a different way of doing things. And so, case studies, little snippets of examples and things like that, I think is where you can lead people by doing stuff and showing them a different way of doing stuff. And I think that's a much more healthy way of doing of kind of disrupting the industry.
yeah,
So yeah, like I say, it pisses me off when people just talk all day, because it's like, it's great that you can talk about it, but show me something different.
yeah.
But I do, yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
But it's funny, right? Because if you look at something like the oddball effect, that's
Mm,
exactly what that is. It's that thing about the thing what is odd and stands out is the thing what's remembered.
mm.
And again, I don't know the answer. This is just a bit of a thought thing. What I'm going through right now is I wonder if I was to ask the people who was in that room when you did that presentation what they remember about it. I wonder what their reflection
Yeah,
would be.
yeah, good. So your original question was, what did I do that was so
Yes.
offensive?
Yeah.
Okay, so put it this way, it was my use of imagery. And so when I got, as an example, when I got to the slide which said, we were talking about community management technology, and the one that they had internally at the time was, I think, called Jive from memory.
Okay.
Um, and what I had done to populate the slides with imagery was Google the titles of these slides. And so when I got to benefits, I Googled benefits, and I used like the first image that was in the Google library for benefits as my slide. So I won't go into the detail of what was on that image,
Okay.
but it was like, what's the most stereotypical thing you can think of in terms of benefits? That's was on the slide, and that theme continued throughout. So
Okay.
that's what I remember.
Okay.
What if I doubt Morton would even remember Morton being in that meeting, my business partner. I doubt what he would have remembered even remember that meeting. I remember Morton taking me for an ice cream when we first met. We went down to the lake at BP, and he took me to the ice cream shop, and we got an ice cream. That
Nice.
was my first proper meeting with Morton.
Okay.
So,
There's a whole.
nothing happened. Nothing
Okay.
happened.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know. That's good to know. Um, you mentioned something quite interesting, which was Nick was basically your work dad,
Yeah.
and I asked a lot of people some questions to ask you,
Oh yeah.
and one of the questions what came out was, um, "Have you turned into your dad?"
Is that one of Nick's questions?
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because
And
yeah.
which dad have you turned into your dad or your work dad? I guess.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I think probably, yeah, I'll turn to both of them to an extent. Um, yeah, Nick. I think partly Nick's asking this question because he did a podcast called, well, it's under Unconventional
Confessions.
Confessions. That's right. I did one of his Confessions podcasts, and those are really deep questions.
Mm.
And we talked a lot about my dad in that pod. So there might be something as a follow up to that. But I mean, this is what we were kind of talking about before we start recording, which is one of my big internal struggles is how much credit can I actually take for what I'm doing.
Mm.
Um, I'm I don't particularly want. Do I particularly want credit? I want to feel confident that I'm not just ripping everybody else off. I don't, I want to have something to be said for what I've done for myself, if that makes sense. Um, So having been brought up essentially in L&D by Nick, most of my ideas come from Nick. So, and I think if I'm honest if you're honest with yourself and you're listening to this, if you're seeing a lot of what people put out on social media like LinkedIn, a lot of them are sort of Nick's ideas regurgitated. But then, you know, Nick's ideas also have come from what he's read, such as Design of Everyday Things, which is design thinking methodology. 5DI is design thinking methodology with different words. So in that way, it's also just a rip off is the wrong words, but it's also just an evolution of an existing idea. Um, so yeah, I guess we do things at Solve that I think are different to what anybody else does. We do stuff culturally that I think is quite different to what people are used to in business. Do I think that we've done anything? What's our unique IP is producing awesome things, or new approaches and innovation around experience design or digital stuff. That's what we're really good at. But it is borrowing from the consumer world, and repurposing the ideas. So maybe I'm rambling, but it's like, I think maybe it's that question is, am I just regurgitating ideas that or approaches that I've just borrowed either from my real dad or my work dad? And I think probably partly yes. I would be lying to myself if I didn't say that was true. But I suppose what I'm grappling for is, what's the value in what I'm doing? What am I really bringing to the table? So yeah, it's a good question.
I think what you bring is your unique angle on what that is. Like for me, there's a really good YouTube video. I think it's called "Everything Is a Remix." And it's about 20 minutes long, 30 minutes long. And what it does is it pulls one idea and reverse engineers it back and shows this is it. It's a remix, but everyone has a slight iteration on it, and that is your fingerprint on that thing, because people can't see into the future. And a lot of time when you build on an idea, you bring in the context of where the world is and what is happening in that world, and you apply that fingerprint onto that idea. Yeah, I mean, when you look at design thinking steps all the way back from user-centered design. If you look at human-centered design, user-centered design, they're two different things. One moved from user interface to human problems. Like it's just it's an evolution. And sometimes evolution is just a rewording. Sometimes it's taking the complex and making it into the layman. And sometimes when I look at some of these kind of frameworks, that's what it is. It's taking something what already exists and going, only a small percentage of people get that, but actually they change the language and make it more consumable. That's your fingerprint. That's your remix of that idea, I guess, is how I see it. And then a lot of times when you do design it, like when I think about my experience design approach, that takes elements from other different people, but I've not really seen anyone slam it together and interweave it together. So I like to think that is me, but there's a risk, right? That isn't, that someone's already come up with it and you just don't know. And ultimately, if it is a good approach, then you probably won't know about it till it's too late anyway. Like until it's been tried and tested and failed 100 times, maybe.
Yeah, and I think this is where the importance of having diversity in the team is where those ideas really start to become interesting, because my stupid fat head can only hold so many ideas and only so many experiences. But if I can get a team together who are really excellent, interesting, and experienced in their own ways, and they can bring their own experiences and context to evolve the idea, then you get a much better result, a much more different result than you would get if you were just thinking it in your own head. So I think, again, that's like within a frame, within certain guardrails. I think that's another thing I've learned over the last sort of 4 years, is the real value of diversity of thought, which I think a lot of people talk about. I certainly would say I would have said it's really important, but not to the extent that I understand it to be now.
Well, that kind of leads me onto a question thinking about Solve then. So I know a little bit about Solved. Obviously, I don't know lots. But your team seems like it's creative people. It's quite diverse. It's diverse in its thinking and in its doing. But before we get into that diversity and kind of what makes it unique, I want to think about the feedback what they've maybe give you. So you mentioned earlier, I think right at the start around you've had feedback. I guess it's a two-part question, which is a fundamentally wrong way to do it, but hey ho,
Mm,
it's my podcast.
yeah.
I guess question one is what's the kind of the hardest piece of feedback you've had? And that doesn't necessarily need to be within the team and what they've given you. Maybe think about it as a collective over your career. Other than read books.
Mm.
Um
Yeah.
what
It's genius.
yeah.
It's
What
genius is the simplicity.
what's been the hardest piece of feedback you've had in your kind of I guess career so far?
Hardest piece of feedback. Hmm. Sorry, I probably should have thought about this before, but
Not at all. You couldn't because I didn't give you the questions.
well, yeah, in this latest example,
Yeah.
so I got a list. I would recommend this to anyone who's got a team, by the way. This is something that I did recently, and I just was surprised at how useful it was. But I got somebody else, another leader in the team, to go out to the team and ask them for feedback on me. And it was really simple stuff around two kind of main areas. One was, what am I doing well? Second one was, what could I be doing better, or have you got any advice for me? So I'm looking at it now. I've got like about 36 lines of kind of suggestions or advice from the team. A lot of them are really actionable. But also it's nice to read some more positive stuff as well, because I suppose you can really question the impact or the value of what you're doing when you don't actually do a lot of the doing. That's
Mm.
probably been one of the hardest things to do, is going from a individual contributor or a team of two to a much bigger team, and not being in all the detail all the time, is feeling like you're adding value. So having that kind of positive reinforcement, assuming your team like you and you're not a complete arsehole, um, is really beneficial too. So, but in terms of what I got back, I suppose your question about difficult feedback, the most difficult stuff is the stuff that's difficult to action, but you're aware of. So my big problem is delegation. Basically, it's like, when do I need to get rid of certain tasks and delegate it to the team? Because then what I'm left with is actually strategy. So thinking about what we should be doing more holistically, and where we should be focusing our time for commercial purposes and whatnot. And it's like, that doesn't feel natural to me, having not been in this position before. So that is difficult for me to action. In terms of, I suppose, what's been the most shocking piece of feedback, which probably is slightly maybe where your question is coming from. I don't think I've ever had like really difficult feedback, like, you're just shit at this. Well, I had the kind of, you're just shit at this job, Charlie, kind of feedback, which is actually in the marketing team that I was working in. I just couldn't get my head around how to organize an event, like make a list, deliver the list,
Mm.
do it on time and on budget, kind of thing, was just beyond me for some reason. But I also had a leader who would just get really frustrated at me and just essentially shout at me. And yeah, I was too young to really know what to do with that sort of feedback. So so I kind of moved sideways in the organization and got out of there. I was moved sideways, rather.
Nudged
um,
along.
I was nudged, which is ironic now, because we're doing a lot of events at the moment, and it's part of what we do. So it's obviously I learned to do it eventually, just not at the right time.
So I guess I wonder where that comes from. So I think, consultant to consultant, a lot of the time it is a case of you've got to be in the weeds, tactical, sleeves rolled up approach, and then sometimes you've got to be brought in to be the thought leader. Um, where's your natural preference then? Like it sounds to me, there's something around delegation and letting go of your Lego bricks and all that good stuff. And I guess where do you like to play the most then? Do you like to play the most in strategy or do you like to play the most in tactical, I guess?
mm, Well, I think it's nice to have both, isn't it? Really,
Yep.
have a bit of both. I think where I'm best is the client relationship stuff, fixing problems. I think I'm basically think solved and solved together and myself and are really just kind of problem solving machines. That's what we do. Um, which is why we're kind of 1 foot in the L&D camp, but we're not really doing L&D in a traditional sense, although part of the solution might be some kind of quote unquote training. So yeah, I think probably whatever problems to solve is what I enjoy doing most, and that whether that's be at a strategic level or as a tactical level. I think the tactical can be more satisfying immediately, but longer term, I think strategic level is where you get longer term value. So yeah,
Yeah.
bit of both. It's nice to have both, I think.
So I find this fascinating. I've been writing an article about this, and I wrote it maybe 4 or 5 times around the whole theory of bullshit jobs.
Yeah,
Um, and I think bullshit jobs are a consultant or they're not a consultant. It's a real tricky one, right? Because depending on who you ask and the experience of working with a certain consultant versus a different consultant is very it's contextual. Um, but thinking about your, I guess, non-solved experience
yeah.
prior to solved, what's a one trait, if you like, you want to let go of what you picked up in consulting?
That's a good question. I think. Well, I think what I've had to let go of or do more of is kind of finding the finding the joy in other people's success. Whereas in consulting, a lot of it's kind of bravado and showing off that you can do stuff, because essentially it's a consultancy, for those who don't know, is a bit like internally a bit like a marketplace. So they have a formal process where it's like you have a resourcing manager and their job is allegedly to pick from everybody in the pool of consultants that are on the bench and assign you to a project that's best suited to your skill set. Whereas in reality, it's, Bob has a job. He knows Charlie, calls up Charlie, says, I've got this job coming up. Would you want to do it, Charlie? And I say, yes. So that's how it works in practice, but it's not the way it's supposed to work. So yeah, there is a lot of bravado, networking, sort of inconsistency in people's experience based on how extrovert they are and stuff like that. So I think being more respectful of people who don't have that sort of same bravado and recognizing their capability is something that has kind of evolved. And that now when I look back on consulting historically, I think maybe that I had more time for people that were more kind of outwardly confident. But that's not necessarily where the real expertise is, I think.
Yeah, nice, nice. So, seeing as we're into solved, I guess there's a couple of things which is interesting. And I think not many people do this very well. They don't share the experience of creating something like solved. It happens over here, and it's all not hush hush, but they're too busy making shit happen, right, to actually share it. And I guess how long has been solved been going for now, Charlie?
So it'll be 4 and a bit years. So 5 years in. We are our business year is September to September, so it'll be 5 years in September next year,
Ah, okay.
November. Yeah.
So tell me about how kind of Solve came together and like what does it look like? Because obviously you've gone from you and I think Martin to having this team now and having this great brand and like you say being known as problem solvers. But yeah, walk me through that kind of whole experience of setting that up.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not a risk taker to start with. So um, I would never have done this if I didn't have Morton um, as a friend and business partner. So so one of if people ask me for my advice, which I know you're not doing, but if anyone else out there is thinking about setting up their own business, then finding somebody that you trust to the core of your soul, that you align with in terms of values and principles, I think work with them, because it just takes a problem shared as a problem halved, basically. So where we the long, potentially boring story, but it's a podcast, so you can cut it out. Is the so Morton met some people, a recruitment company, which will be remain unnamed, at a conference. I think they had a conversation which was along the lines of, so you want to recruit for the type of consultants that you are, but we can't find enough of you. So why don't you set up a business, and then we'll essentially be your middlemen to clients,
Oh, okay.
doing learning innovation essentially. So Morn sort of put it out in the group, said who'd be up for this. I put my hand up, as did a few other people. We went through probably 3 or 4 meetings where this recruitment company, the sales manager and someone else would go out, and we'll go out for nice drinks, and went to Sushi Samba, ate everything on their company, and that was superb. And then went through the business plan conversations and all that good stuff, came up with a brand name, wasn't solved at that time. And then we went up to Birmingham to present the idea to the CFO and the CEO. And it was quite clear that the CFO and CEO didn't really have the same vision that the other 2 people we've been talking to had. And I remember the CEO was in the meeting on his laptop answering emails for like most of it. So it was quite disrespectful, and we didn't really feel like they got it. And they made us an offer that we could very much refuse, which was kind
Right,
of like,
okay.
it was like insulting. So we basically said, well, we've done all this work now. We know what the business proposition is, and we know where we're going to add value. So why don't we just set the business up between us? And at the time, it was 3 of us. But yeah, it ended up being just Morton and I, and then we started the business with our first client, which was with Peter Rieber in Novo Nordisk over in Denmark. Spent a few months flying back and forth to Denmark, having a great time, drinking Christmas beer, laughing at Charlie's pronunciation of Danish words, and then and then COVID hit. So I spent the next 6 months, 6 to 12 months longer, um, you know, balancing my laptop on a chest of drawers, doing the business remotely and all that good stuff. But because our clients are in Denmark, it didn't really affect us at the time because we were doing a lot of virtually anyway, so we just carried on. And then more opportunities, more projects came out partly through Nick, partly through other referrals and network for our network and whatnot. And then we just sort of built up from there and hired some people and grew organically. And we just our main focus is making sure that the work that we deliver is absolute top quality at all times, because that's my focus anyway, because that's where all our work comes through is referral. So we have to do good work, we have to deliver
Mm.
value, we have to do stuff that's different and that clients can stand behind and say, essentially take credit for it, which is absolutely right. They're right, because it's their money, they're paying us to do stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where it's come from, and how we've gone about growing it to this point.
Was there ever a point in the time from obviously starting up to now where you was like, "Holy shit, have I made the right choice here?" Like, is there a point what you can maybe share where you was like, "Yeah, I don't know."
No, not really. I think at the beginning, when I started working with Morton again, because we worked together at BP many years ago, the early weeks was like trying to get to know how to work together, because Morton is very strong-willed, forthright, expert in his field, and I'm much more kind of, well, I'm like the polar opposite. In many ways. So what's great about Morton is that we have completely the opposite perspectives on the same problem, but we generally align on the decision.
Mm.
So what that means is you make sure you're pretty much covering all bases in making decisions. So I think that's been why it's been successful. Partly why it's been so successful, I think, is to have that different perspective, which is why another bit of advice for choosing your business partner would, don't pick somebody who's like you, pick somebody that's the opposite, because they'll do all the shit jobs you don't want to do, and you'll do the shit jobs they don't want to do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that came about. Yeah.
So you mentioned you're not a risk taker, and I guess
Yeah.
I want to go back to what was and it's you can't use solved again my rules. Maybe let's go all the way back to kind of your teenage days. Like, what was the biggest risk? Like, where does that not a risk taker come from? Is it a case of the people you surrounded weren't risk takers who was really kind of focused on security, or is it just a trait what you've just developed over time? I guess.
Mm, yeah. I remember, well, I'm not sure that it's true now I'm thinking about it, but what I'm thinking about is when when I was a very little boy, there is footage of me going down like a slide, like a I was stark bollock naked, little Charlie running around in the garden. It was fine in those days. Um, not anymore. No, you can't be naked. Um, the I was just so careful on like the slide, and my parents would laugh at it because they were like, Charlie's just really careful. He takes his time, makes sure everything's okay before he goes down the slide. And that's actually how my daughter is as well. Funnily enough, she's got that kind of, she puts everything back in the right place, and she's very careful with what she does. She hasn't really seriously injured herself, um, which is great as a child, but she's generally quite careful. And so I wonder if that's from me. But I think there's something about just sort of figuring stuff out and making sure that before I do anything, that there's not like tigers in the bushes or anything like that. I think that's what I
Mm,
mean by that. And with Solved and setting the company up, it was like I kind of scanned through all the potential risks, and I had enough of a safety net in a number of places that I thought, look, if this goes tits up in the next 3 months, um, I'll just call up X company and just go back and go back and work for them with no problem. I just walk through the door. So I'd kind of put enough in place that taking the leap wasn't going to be a problem. And to your point earlier about Venderly, we both, well, Morton and I both basically full time on that on Solve straight away from the beginning.
interesting.
Um, and I think you get in what you put out. You put out what you get in. You know what I mean? You get in what you put in. So God damn it, get out what you put in. Took me 4 attempts. I'm quite tired. Remy was up last night until like 4 a.m. and I slept on the floor of the nursery holding her hand through the bars. So I haven't had much sleep. So yeah, we both worked full time for the first from the off basically as the company began.
And your daughter is she daddy's little girl or mummy's little girl?
That is little girl. Yeah.
Interesting.
But my wife's really, really pregnant, so she can't really play with Remy like I can. So
Mm.
I can do aeroplane games, and she climbs like she holds my hands and then walks up my body and then sits on my head, like this kind of thing. That's impossible for Rachel to do. So I think I'm probably just a bit more fun at the minute, which is why she has a tendency to want to hang out with me more at the minute, but we'll see.
And obviously, I kind of this is a weighted question because I know the answer. I think I do anyway. But is is Rachel not a risk taker or is she a risk taker?
She's less of a risk taker than I am, I'd say. Yeah. So
Interesting.
she works as strategy and innovation lead at Just Eat.
Interesting.
So really interesting job thinking about strategic things. She's incredibly smart, much smarter than I am. And but when we're talking about like business decisions, and where the business is going and what the pipeline looks like and stuff, she's always quite anxious about those things. She's more anxious than I am about stuff like, pipeline and stuff like that. So yeah, overall, and she's been in her role for sort of 7-8 years and stuff. So she's kind of happier knowing and having a bit of stability than I am. I think I'm probably slightly more happy to take the risks than she is.
Interesting. Okay. What what is solved then? So I guess, when I kind of very first came across it, obviously when you very first set it up, it was maybe more leaning towards learning, maybe.
Mm,
But actually when I look at solve now, it's not learning. Like it can be learning it, but it can also not be learning. It can be other different things. And I guess if you used to kind of summarize what solve does right now, because I see you more
mm.
as um EX and people experience and stuff. But I don't know, like, yeah, what's the take on solve now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we're still figuring it out. I mean, if you were a new client and I was chatting to you about what we do, I would say we apply human-centered design and product design methodology to L&D or education.
Mm.
That's how I would position us. Um, I think that the big difference in what we do versus what I've seen other companies do is when you're in your define and discover. I'm using 5DI terminology, but when you're defining a project, finding out what the problem you're solving is, and when you're in discovery, speaking to people about what their pain points are. When you get to design, most L&D companies will go, okay, well, what are the learning solutions that we can use to solve these problems? Whereas we just say, and this is where having a broad team, broad capability within your team comes from, is what are the solutions to the problems that we found, which, as you say, is not always going to be learning at all. It could be literally anything. And I think that's the exciting thing about working at Solved, is the more people we bring in with slightly different expertise. So we recently hired a behavioral scientist. What are the heuristics we can apply here to have the change effect that the client needs? Doing proper, deep dive research into real challenges that these organizations are having, I think is really interesting as well. And none of that I would class as learning, really.
Mm.
We don't have a platform that we flog, so we're kind of technology agnostic, and that's difficult. It makes it difficult to win awards if you don't have a technology to flog.
Yeah.
But it does give you it does mean you can partner with clients at a level that means you're completely invested in their success. So I will recommend whatever and whoever will deliver the value that a client needs. And I think that partnership and that challenge that we give to clients is partly where our value comes from, as well as having deep technical expertise in certain areas. So yeah, that's the really long answer. To summarize it as kind of problem solvers.
One of the big things which I'm talking about at the moment is actually you just need to create anti-fragile teams and do team accounting. Like if you do that, it doesn't matter what fecking label you want to call yourself. It doesn't really matter because you're just there to fix problems.
Mm,
As long as you know the transition of that person and that shape, if you like. Um, but I guess one of the things which I find fascinating, and I find it fascinating from you, Charlie, is because you're the person who goes in and helps cultures and businesses, but now you have a business and you've got these
mm.
people who want that nice experience and that nice culture from you. How have you managed juggling that? Like, how's that been? Because you kind of hear about people not drinking their own Kool-Aid. Like, how do
Mm.
you manage that internally as obviously the owner of a business, but as someone who has to project that out into the bigger businesses of the world and whatever else?
Yeah, good question. I think there's like the practical answer to that, and then there's like a philosophical mindset answer to that. But for me, it all starts with who you want to work with and who you hire.
Mm.
So we have a 4-step process in recruitment. So we have a couple of informal conversations, then we have a case study, and then we have a technical interview. And then we do what your salary expectations and whatnot are. Or sometimes we do that earlier just to make sure they don't want ridiculous salary. Um, but making sure that the people that join have the right experience, vision, attitude, principles, and values, I think is where is half the battle, because it means that I can essentially we've got an onboarding process which is essentially we'll book out time in their diary for the first 3 days, which is do this time, do this at this time, speak to this person here, meet this person, just so they, in the first few days that they're in the company, they have a really clear map of what they're supposed to be doing when, and we just put it into their diary and their calendars as how to do stuff. And we've refined that over the different hires we've made as people have given us feedback on it. Post that first 3 to 5 days, however long we want to map their time out, we more or less just give the team as much autonomy as we can give them within the framework that we have, which is these are the projects we have to do now, these are the client expectations, this is the scope of work and how much time you have to do it. How you want to deliver that is completely up to you. Nice. We are available for any support or advice or guidance, and I'll maybe meet everybody once a month just to check in and make sure there's nothing kind of going seriously wrong that I need to sort out. So I think it's autonomy, having autonomy, actually genuinely caring about people and giving and showing that you genuinely care about people. So it's different for different people. Some people like just to be thanked for the hard work. Some people like to receive a card and a bunch of flowers when they've done a big project or something. So having a sense of the team and who needs what from the people who are running the company, I think has been really important. And then we do little things like we have a vibe score, which we kind of share every Tuesday and Thursday when we get together as a team virtually. It just says, how you're feeling at that time. 5 being, I'm ecstatic. 1 being I'm having the worst day ever. And, we just monitor how people are feeling really over the course of a week. And if there's seems to be some uncertainty or anxiety or something that they need support with, we'll step in and have a conversation, say that, is there anything we can do? So I think there's nothing kind of rocket science in there, but I think having these little practical things that we do along lines, and also having bring the right people in with the right values and attitude, that means I don't have to worry that if I just give them autonomy that they're going to go off or take the piss or do stuff they're not supposed to do or whatever. So it's like a combination of different things, but I think we have I think the culture we have here is the part of the reason why people stay. We've kept, I'm trying to think I don't think any of our consultants have left since we started the business.
It's pretty good.
So 100% retention rate so far.
Yeah. So what happens now? Because I guess, there's a lot of the stuff which I find myself doing is, I call it culture crafting or culture hacking, which is actually how do you look at team effectiveness, team dynamic and stuff like that. And obviously with scale comes that problem. The bonds become more and more stretched. What's the future, I guess, of Solved? Is it to continue getting bigger, or is it to kind of, I mean, obviously life changes and world change, and then this answer you might answer differently next year. But for now, like, what is the kind of idea? Is it to kind of maintain size, or is it to grow?
Yeah, I think we will grow again over the next year or two. The ambition we always said was to get to like 25, 30 people, because that's like a manageable size to maintain our boutiqueness. But actually, most recently I've been thinking, well, if we grow beyond that, because the demand is there, and if we grow beyond that and we can retain the culture, then that's fine with me. I also think that I was chatting to my wife about this last week, and she went, you're quite unusual that you don't have the really strong loyalty to the company itself, if that makes sense. The loyalty I have is generally to the people that work at Solved. But actually, if it was like close the company down tomorrow, I'd be like, well, that's that then. Move on to the next thing. What I'd care about is the people in the team. So I think what that means is, unlike people who have a really kind of hardcore vision for what the company can be, I think I have a much more flexible and agile view of what it will be. It will probably look indistinguishable from what it is now in 3 years' time, and I probably will be. I won't really understand what's going on half the time, which I think uh, is absolutely great because I'll be learning from everybody else around me, and I think that's what I really enjoy as well as working with a diverse team is how foolish and incapable you feel most of the time when you see the stuff that other people are doing, and that's really exciting. So yeah, I couldn't predict it because I'm not going to control where it goes is probably the answer.
Yeah.
It's going to grow with the market, and it's going to grow with the value that we add to clients.
It's fascinating because you talked earlier around at the start where he's like actually something around looking after the people, and I think you mentioned something around growing them and stuff. And yet, when I've just asked you right now, your partner's just said, "Oh, you could not got loyalty to the business, like in that term, but you've got loyalty to the people. Like, so you haven't actually changed. If anything, you strengthened the thing. What actually makes you quite special." Um, and I guess just listening to you speak there, there's something about the human, like the human in the workplace, the human in the language. And I obviously I've never worked at your place, but it sounds like you've removed a lot of the bullshit that is in normal consultancy. A lot of the red tape. It's like we'll talk in layman's terms, we're talking human terms, and yeah, there's it feels there's something nice around removing of that ego, I guess.
Mm, yeah.
Mm.
Um, so I've been thinking about this based on the feedback that I mentioned before that I got from my team. There are some unwritten rules at Solved um, that makes us what we are. And I don't think we communicated them particularly well before. So what I did was I started putting together a list of the unwritten rules that we have, or the things that are there that people might see and be wonder about, but not have a reason for. So one of them is, why do we have a flat hierarchy? And I've got a, what does it mean? Why is it important? And where does it come from? And your point about the ego on this, why do we have a flat hierarchy? Where does this come from? Leaders who think they're the most important person in the room and who ignore the other people or the views of other people in the room are repulsive.
Beautiful, beautiful.
so so yes, basically, like, um there's this there is stuff like that where it's just like, having worked, and actually that's probably one of our strengths as well, is a lot of people who work at Solved have worked in house, they've worked in agency, they've worked in consultancy, and they can see the bullshit of those kind of organizations. And so a lot of what the consultancy, a lot of the consulting that we do is, how do you iron out some of the bullshit and just make it more effective and personable and practical and friendly and things like that. So yeah, I think that's part, removing the bullshit is part of the what we do, I think, as a team. What else have I got in here? Why do we have T-shaped consultants? So that was back to your point earlier. Having a broad capability, but also having some areas of specialism. Why does Solved feel chaotic at times? I worked at PA Consulting, and I really like the organized chaos, basically, because it feels like the chaos is where some of the magic happens, because you get different people bumping into other people by mistake sometimes, and that's where the tension can make magic happen. So I think we've kind of engineered a bit of, there's a real clear structure in what we do. We've got an internal playbook, which is, this is how you work, this is how you should approach clients, this is, et cetera, et cetera. But then outside of that framework is like, just do the best you can and see, and and do the best you can, do the best work you can, and help the people around you, and see what kind of comes out of it. And the last one which I got to was like, why do we have fun? Which I haven't actually finished, but it's something along the lines of, we're getting together once a month at the moment, because a lot of us are hybrid, and we just basically spend morning doing a bit of strategy, and then the afternoon doing a bit of fun stuff like shuffleboard and darts and axe throwing, or whatever you can, escape rooms, and just spending that time together, particularly when you spend so much time sat behind a desk, it's just so enriching. and so it's, fun is one word of putting it. Like adventures is another way I put it, which is like just going out, meeting new people, going to conferences, awards, whatever it might be. It's an adventure that you can talk about with your colleagues, and I think those sorts of little activities are super important,
Hmm.
particularly in this kind of hybrid world.
Nice, nice. I like it. I like it. It's something. There's just something what uses for me. About drinking your own Kool Aid, I think there's there's a risk with lots of companies who do the Instagram versus reality. This is what we do, but reality is actually no. Your company's shit.
Mm,
Your culture's really piss poor. I don't
mm,
get that at all from this conversation, and obviously I know a few people who work there as well. Um, but I wanna fast forward into time. I don't know what your plans are, but let's pretend a genie. Why not? A genie says, "Okay, Charlie, I'm going to buy your company off you, and I'm going to give you your time back in what all the time you invested in being a leader, being a manager. And I'm going to give you all that time back. If you give you all that time back now, what would you do? Or what would you do differently as a person?
hmm. Do I have to do anything differently, or can I just do the same stuff again?
Nope, not if you don't want to.
Yeah, yeah. I think to be fair, I would say, uh, given all the stuff with COVID and the timing of our firstborn, and probably the timing of our secondborn, I would say I couldn't have played it better. Um, you know, I think I've definitely done the best I can, and I think I've broadly made the right decisions with the business, and I feel really happy with where we are and what we've achieved. So, um, and personally, it's given us a life that we wouldn't have been able to afford, frankly. Um, so I think, yeah, if the genie gave me time back again, I'd just do exactly the same thing. Um,
Nice.
yeah, maybe we would have gone to that on that holiday to Portugal when they locked down the day before and just sucked it up, on the journey
Oh
back.
well.
You know, there's those things. There's those first world problems like not being able to go to Portugal on my fifth holiday that year. But, yeah, no, it's been pretty great to be honest. And it feels like I'm at a transitional stage in my life really where, well, I turned 37 a couple of weeks ago,
Nice.
and
Congrats, belated.
thank you. And I was just thinking, wow, yeah, this is my life now. Like when you're growing up, it's kind of, when I grow up, I'm going to do this, this, and this. But it's like I'm now will be a father of two, and I run a business. I'm 37. I live in Shoreditch. I've got a really nice house which we just spent some money doing up and whatnot. It's like, is this where I would have thought I would have got to in my life? Probably not. I probably would have lived somewhere in the countryside and, I don't know, being a sheep farmer or something. But I'm pretty satisfied with my choices that and where I've got to now. So I have no complaints.
Nice. Nice. I mentioned earlier, I asked a couple of people for some questions. Here's a
Yeah,
curveball for you.
go on then.
Um, if you could submit a question to an alien during an AMA, what's the one question you would ask?
I'd ask them to play me some music,
Okay.
because have I got I know what I'm getting the answer to the question right, an AMA. What does
Ask me
that stand
anything.
for? Yeah, fine. Okay, go right. Um, you're too cool, Danny. Those acronyms threw me off. Yeah, I probably wanted to play me some music. There's something about, I'm just curious about alien music for some reason. I just think it would be interesting to play them something, and how would that, you know, obviously sound is just a vibration of air, right? So how would the vibration of air, how would they register that in their brains, and how would they hear it, and would they enjoy it? Like, would there be raves with like loads of aliens loving it, or would they like hate all of that and want to listen to like country? Like, that's what. Whenever I talk about aliens, that's what goes through my head is like, what would be the first song? And if aliens did come and someone had to say, well, we're going to play them some music, what should we play them? All the people making that decision would be like all these academics that would be like, we should play Beethoven's Symphony.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, play them like, I don't know, Moby or something a bit good that they might actually be able to jam to, maybe play
Oh
some,
man.
maybe give them a few options, see what lands. Everybody's different. So yeah, that would be my my main question for an alien.
It's a good one, though. It's a good answer because you're right. You're spot on, right? Like the first thing we do is we go to this advanced. Let's assume they are advanced, and we go, "Hey, here's some legacy stuff. What you should listen to, Beethoven, rather than here's the present of what
Hmm.
life is really like." Um, and I think we see that in again. I'm bringing it back to work, but like in work, we constantly use methods and frameworks and jargon from yesteryear, which has been debunked, or like you're like, it doesn't stand anymore. It was funny. I was reading what was it? What was it? Influence. Seven what do you call it of influence. And one of them was around getting commitment. And I was like, actually, that probably stood back in the day when my parents were like, my word is my oath and all that shit. But actually, if I look at my nephews and my nieces and just the younger generation, they do not give a shit if they let you down. They don't care anymore. They're not that bothered. It's like, oh well, it is what it is because everyone else is letting everyone else around. I'm like, but yet we still use these levels of influence as frameworks what we should hold to. And it's I don't know. I think there's something with the newer generation of people coming in where they're gonna not only challenge work, but we're gonna challenge the frameworks and the understanding of people. And I think that's why I really liked the stuff which you touched upon, which is um, you brought a behavioural scientist in, like who will have a finger on the pulse of not just the theory and stuff from there, but what it is right now. So yeah,
Yeah, well, that's
yeah,
the evolution bit, isn't it? It's like, where do we go from here with L&D? I think I think Gemma's using the royal we, but you also yourself and other people that you've spoken to on the podcast, um, they'll get more bored of their innovation and their new things, um, than we will.
mm,
So we'll get more bored more quickly of the stuff that we talk about than, let's say, our clients will.
yeah,
So we could probably do the same thing over and over again, which frankly a lot of companies do, for the next 20 years, and we'll still make money and it will still be fine. But we're really hungry to do new and exciting things. So we just push and push and push, and eventually we just leave people behind, and we set up and we become our own industry. Because I don't, I think we're internally at Soul, we're moving faster than I can keep up, really, with what's going on. And I think the, and then you try and apply that to clients that are asking us for their help. Like, we're moving faster than them. So I suppose the challenge is you move too fast that people really understand what the hell it is they're buying from you.
yeah.
So you've got to make sure you're still delivering the value. But I think it's an interesting challenge about where we go from here. I think behavioral science is the area that we're moving into, because I think it's close enough to what people understand and know, uh, to be kind of procurable, essentially. Because if you're not procurable by somebody in a company, it's very difficult to work with a company. So we've got to always going to keep one foot in the L&D world, but I think we're going to stretch that relationship as far as we can go over the next year or two.
Nice. And it's a good question. I was having a conversation. I think it was on someone else's podcast. I was like, look, here's a problem. HR don't even know what HR means anymore. L&D doesn't even know what L&D means anymore. And that conversation will get louder and louder and louder. And as long as you can be there to go, don't give a shit what your title is, like your problem solvers, let us help you solve your problems, that instant becomes a lot more valuable than, oh, I'm an L&D thought leader or whatever. Like, it's nonsense. Um, Charlie, I've got one more question. I won't be mindful of your time. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah, it's a good question. Because I've kind of grown up now, so I've realised like next week, second kid. I'm definitely fully grown up. I'm 37.
Okay.
I can't, I can't joke about it anymore. There's like, it's clear. The jury's out. I'm old. Um, but that's fine because as I say, I'm happy with where I've come from, what I've done. But I think there's kind of a few routes. I think I'd like to do more sport than I
Okay.
have. So maybe at some point I take a step back and I do a bit more. Maybe I do some coaching badges or something and get into that. I'd like to have more holidays. Sounds like I'm going to retire, basically.
So you're
Yeah,
getting old then?
yeah. No, I mean, to be honest, it's difficult to answer that question because I'm kind of like, well, I'm doing what I want to do now, so I'm just going to carry on doing it. Um, so yeah, until something changes, until I stop liking what I'm doing or the people I'm working with, yeah, or I don't feel like we're adding value anymore. Until that happens, then I'm just going to carry on doing this. Yeah.
Nice.
So what I want to be when I grow up is what I'm doing now, but hopefully I'll maybe have a bit more time to do some sport, maybe play a bit of golf.
Nice. Nice.
I'm taking it back to the 80s. I'm going to take clients out on golfing days and whatnot.
Do it. Do it.
That's it.
Yeah. Don't call it a comeback. We definitely should do that. 100%. Charlie, it's been an absolute pleasure. But before we say goodbye, where can people connect with you? Where can they stay up to date with what you're doing? Where can they kind of follow Solved and stuff?
Yeah, so Solve Together is SOLVD, drop the E, together, all one word, .com. So you find our website there. If you go to 5disolved.com, that's where you can download our free toolkit for 5DI. And that kind of gives you some tools and templates, a few videos and things explaining how to do different parts of that process. You can connect with me, Charlie Kneen, at LinkedIn. I'm like the only Charlie Kneen there is because Kneen is a really obscure name. It comes from the Isle of Man. So if you just type me in, you'll find me on there. Yeah, and Solve Together is also a pretty unusual name too. So you'll find us on LinkedIn. There's no, it shouldn't be too complicated. So yeah, that's us basically. And thanks, Danny. It's been really cathartic actually to chat to you because the first time we did this was probably I was at Performance Consultants doing my coaching stuff,
Yeah, I think so.
which was
Yeah.
that would have been about 4 years ago now. So it's almost like you've been on the journey with me.
I feel it. I feel the connection, Charlie. I feel the connection. Um, no, it's been awesome having you on, and good luck with a new Bambino.
Thanks.
Um,
I'm going to
and
be off
yeah,
for 6 weeks, so if you're a client and you're listening to this, please contact morton.bond@solvetogether.com or bridge.felicia@solvetogether.com.
amazing. Charlie, take it easy, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Take it easy.